as far as Temp love goes, the love with the Temp score, there was a major blockbuster picture we worked on, and we wrote some additional music and did a lot of orchestrating and things, and the score had already been completely recorded, completely...
Choir and orchestra.
The choir and orchestra was all done.
Everything.
This was weeks later. The final product was going to be shipped to the distributors, theaters, everything on a Wednesday. The Friday before that Wednesday, we get a call, and they're like, the whole opening of the movie has to be rewritten. The whole opening 10-minute action scene.
And I know the scene you're talking about.
Major motion picture.
Major scene, major action scene.
Yeah, and what happened was, on the dub stage, which was that Friday, before the Wednesday ship date, I guess the director was, as they were dubbing that scene, for some reason he hadn't heard this version of the opening.
I'm not sure it was him. I don't think it was him. I think it might have been one of the producers. I'm not sure it was the director.
It was a combination of the director and some of the studio people, definitely, from how the story was told. But they were like, oh, this sounds different than the Temp. Even though it basically was the same thing. It was the exact vibe, this exact energy it provided, and it was just a little more creative. It was this unique, specific, thematic thing. It just wasn't exactly the Temp. Even though it gave this same, it was really great. It was a really great music with this choir and everything. And they had just been living with this Temp cue for months and months and months. And so since it wasn't the exactly the same, or like a ripoff, they were like, wait.
I mean, it had already been signed off on. Like, everybody was happy, but somebody said, well, let's bring up the Temp. Let's listen to the Temp again.
Yeah, somebody said, bring up the Temp. We want to hear that. So then they bring up the Temp, and then it's the thing they've heard a million times.
Of course. We have to go with that.
It needs to be that. It needs to be that. What are we going to do? It needs to be that.
So had they not called up the Temp at that point, and they just had moved on because it had already been signed off on,
even though whether it was the Temp, something just like the Temp, or what was written, in this scene, it doesn't really make any difference for the audience who's hearing it for the first time. It doesn't make any difference. And so they call us up on the Friday, and we're scrambling to help write this thing over the weekend, like in no time, with the composer there, like on the couch, listening and helping us, with ideas. And then on Sunday, I think it was Sunday, it went to the studio, and it still wasn't approved. No, it needs to be more like the Temp. I had to go back and fix it again. So like Sunday night, then it was sent to orchestration on Monday, so that then Monday, Tuesday, whatever, then sent to the copyists on Tuesday, so then on Wednesday, which is the day of shipment, they have another morning recording session to do this whole thing.
Wednesday night. It had to be, the final print master had to be.
It was like a 2-hour session or something.
But then they have to mix it and get it to the dub.
They had to mix it that afternoon, dub it that night, and ship it out late that same night. And in the process, it was something like $60,000 more for that session. And it's like, to me, the logic is, what's the reason for rescoring this? Is it because it's going to make it a better film and more people are going to see it and make more money? I don't think so. I think people have gone to see it, whether it was this cue or this cue, wouldn't have made a bit of difference in the people watching the movie and how much money they made. They lost money, in my opinion, by spending that extra $60,000 on another session to redo something just to make it closer to the Temp, when that Temp wasn't written for this scene. It was written for some other thing.
The theory is also they could have just bought the license, the master rights for the Temp music, and dropped it in there for probably cheaper.
Yeah,
possible.
Yeah, and so
the intent of making these decisions ultimately would be to make more money as a business, but in this case, they spent more money than they probably would have made. It's like,
so then the head composer,
and that's not counting the $60,000 for the session, but that's not counting the OT for the dub stage, the engineers, and the final print.
That was just for the recording itself. And then
the other thing was that there was no time to record choir, and there was a lot of choir in this music. And so Jason and I and the composer were in my apartment, recording ourselves singing
over and over again,
like layering it to make it sound like a choir, and that's what's in the movie. So we're looking around like in my little apartment at the time, like on my home rig, and it's like, this is how a blockbuster movie's made? What? And you can totally hear it in the film. It's like very prominent. You can really hear it. It ended up sounding good, yeah, but it was just funny. That was just such a funny process.
So you have this last minute thing when it really seems to come down to like fear and ego from these executives and whoever who it has to be like the Temp, because they don't understand that if you haven't lived with it for months, the audience hearing it for the first time, they're going to end up wasting so much money doing that and throwing a wrench in a whole team of people's weekend that we were done. It had been weeks. We were done with the whole project and move on to other things. Now we have to go back and open that whole thing up but they don't, it's all about money or whatever it is to them, even though they lost, I don't know. It just seems crazy. It seems like there's weird fear and ego problems.
Decisions being made that aren't really about.
And incompetence, no matter where you are, all the way along. So it's important to people stepping into this to know, just because you're on a big studio movie doesn't mean it's this magical, amazing thing. If you can know that, when you've been kind of disillusioned and the curtain's been pulled back and you see that it's the same basically everywhere, I think it's easier to kind of know what you're dealing with and not be so like disappointed and know that you're going to deal with the same kind of crap you deal with anywhere. You're going to deal with it at the highest level.
One of my mentors told me, he said that people think that they get to the big studios and the big money and they're like, oh, all my problems are solved. And he said, well, what actually happens is it's 10 times more pressure with 100 times more money and a lot more stakes, and it's 10 times as hard.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. You gotta have a thick skin and know what stuff to let go of and just kind of sit back and be like, it's out of my hands, but it's fine.
And that's one of the main reasons I enjoy the orchestration part, because you never have to deal with that. All of those things are taken care of before it's been given to you. And if there's a major revision or something happens, then you get paid again for that version. It's very cut and dry. Yeah. You sit down, you have this many notes to get through, and you just, the whole score passes through your hands in like a major way, so you get to have a big part of it, but you don't have to deal with. It's a very different kind of process. There's nobody revising what you do. It's like you're sort of the final say on that process, but and your dialogue is with the composer. You're working with a fellow musician as far as the communication, and your boss is another musician as opposed to a team of maybe some non-creative people who don't quite know what to tell you.
You get credit for what you do.
And special payments.
And special payments if it's a union gig, yeah.
That's so many times when you're working as an additional composer, or you're on the team to help them get it done, because so often there's just not enough time for the head composer to get it all done, so they have to hire help. You don't get any kind of credit or recognition at all. Sometimes you get paid well, and it's absolutely worth the time and the work.
You can get credit. We've gotten varying degrees of that, but sometimes there's no credit.
Yeah. But with orchestration, it's a separate, specific process, and you get direct credit and direct pay and time, and it's a nice step.
Thanks for joining us here at the home of Jason and Nolan Livesay. I'm Mark Edward Lewis from Cinema Sound, and if you've gotten any value out of this video at all, please subscribe to this channel and come join us at cinemasound.com, where we have hundreds of videos and blog posts to help you get that Hollywood unfair competitive advantage into your production. Until then, we'll see you in post.
Even if it's for yourself.